Wembanyama's coldest moment. Victor Wembanyama did not look like a man who had just lost a basketball game. He looked like someone who had just watched a dream get stolen in front of the entire world. The confetti was not for him. The trophy was not for San Antonio. The roar echoing through the arena belonged to the New York Knicks, a franchise that had waited 53 years to feel this moment again. And there was Wemby sitting at the podium, eyes heavy, voice controlled, trying to explain a pain most two-year-olds would never understand. Then he said the words that froze the room. He was pissed. Not sad, not confused, not looking for excuses, pissed. And the reason was even more dangerous than the emotion itself. Wembanyama was not angry at the referees. He was not blaming his teammates. He was not attacking the Knicks. He was angry because he knew how close the Spurs had been. He knew they had touched the edge of history, and now they had to wait almost 100 games just to get back to the same door. That is what makes this loss so terrifying for the rest of the NBA, because this was not the sound of a young star breaking down. This was the sound of a future champion being created in real time. Jalen Brunson had just delivered a legendary 4-5 point masterpiece to close the finals. The Knicks had survived every punch San Antonio threw at them, and somehow, in the biggest moments, New York kept finding one more shot, one more stop, one more answer. For Wemby, that is the part that burns deepest. The Spurs were not destroyed. They were not exposed as frauds. They led. They controlled stretches. They had the series in their hands more than once, and still, they lost. That kind of pain does not disappear. It becomes fuel. Before we go deeper, comment where you are watching from. If you believe Wembanyama will come back stronger, press 1. If you think the Knicks broke San Antonio's spirit, press 2. And subscribe, because this story is only getting darker. The night New York took everything. The Knicks did not just win a championship. They ripped the ending away from San Antonio. For 53 years, New York had waited for one more banner, one more parade, one more night where Madison Square Garden could finally stop living in the past. And when Jalen Brunson walked into Game 5, he played like a man carrying 5 decades of pain on his shoulders. 45 points, 15 in the fourth quarter. Every time the Spurs reached for control, Brunson snatched it back. Wembanyama stood on the other side of that masterpiece, knowing his own numbers were not enough. 19 points, 14 rebounds, 5 blocks. On paper, that is strong. In a championship closeout game, it felt empty, because the finals do not care about potential. They do not care about age. They do not care that you are 7'4" with the future in your hand. They only care who finishes. And New York finished. The worst part for Wemby was not watching the Knicks celebrate. It was knowing San Antonio had chances to stop it. This was not a sweep. This was not domination. This was a young team losing by inches, by moments, by mistakes that only reveal themselves when the pressure becomes unbearable. The Knicks had experience. The Spurs had electricity. But when the final minutes arrived, experience won. That is why Wembanyama's face at the podium mattered. He was not just mourning a loss. He was processing the difference between being good enough to arrive and being strong enough to conquer. And for the first time, the NBA saw Wemby look mortal. The series San Antonio should have won. This is what makes the Spurs collapse so painful. They were not chasing the Knicks for most of the series. They were ahead. San Antonio controlled long stretches. They dictated tempo. They made New York uncomfortable. Wembanyama's length swallowed driving lanes. His presence changed shots before they even left players' hands. And the young Spurs looked fearless for most of the final. But championships are not won by leading most of the night. They are won by owning the final 2 minutes. And that is where the Spurs broke. 3 separate times San Antonio found itself in position to close. 3 separate times the moment became too heavy. 1 rushed possession, 1 missed rotation, 1 loose rebound. 1 Brunson shot that should have been impossible but somehow went in anyway. That is the difference between a team with talent and a team with scars. The Knicks had been hurt before. They knew what panic felt like. They knew how to survive a storm without losing their identity. The Spurs, as brilliant as they were still learning that the finals do not forgive emotional swings. Wemby understood it immediately. He said the margin of error was thin, but the truth is, it was almost invisible. San Antonio's highs were spectacular. Their lows were fatal. And that is the lesson that will follow them into every practice, every film session, every road trip next season. They did not lose because they lacked greatness. They lost because greatness has to stay calm when everything is burning. The 2-9 point nightmare. Game 4 was the moment this series changed forever. San Antonio had New York buried. A 2-9 point lead. The crowd stunned. The Knicks searching for answers. Wembanyama controlling the game like a force from another planet. For a while, it looked like the Spurs were about to even the series and steal back momentum. Then the lead started shrinking. At first, it felt harmless. A Brunson bucket, a defensive stop, a New York run that seemed too small to matter. But the finals have a strange way of turning small cracks into disasters. The Spurs began playing not to lose, the ball slowed down, the shots became tighter, every possession felt heavier than the one before it. New York smelled fear. By the final seconds, the building was alive again. Brunson missed a contested three, but the ball did not bounce to San Antonio. It found OG Anunoby. One tip, one brutal touch, 1 point, Knicks 107, Spurs 106, a 9-point lead gone. That was not just a loss. That was a scar. Wembanyama had to walk into Game 5 carrying the weight of the biggest collapse of his young career. The entire NBA had seen it. Every analyst had replayed it. Every critic had asked the same question. Were the Spurs too young for the moment? Game 4 did not answer that question quietly. It screamed it. The quote that split the internet after Game 4, most players would have spoken carefully. They would have said the right things, kept their heads down, and tried to survive the noise. Wembanyama did the opposite. Asked if the Spurs could still come back from a 3-1 finals deficit, he did not hesitate. Absolutely. That one word lit up the basketball world. Some fans called it confidence. Others called it delusion. New York fans laughed. Spurs fans held onto it like oxygen. The media turned it into a headline, because nothing spreads faster than a superstar refusing to sound defeated. But Wemby was not guaranteeing anything to the world. He was speaking from inside the locker room. Inside that room, the Spurs still believed. They had to. No team survives elimination by admitting fear before the ball is even tipped. Still, the timing made it dangerous. The Spurs had just blown a historic lead. The Knicks had momentum, Brunson looked unstoppable, and Wembanyama, only 22 years old, was standing in front of cameras acting like history was still waiting for him. That is the burden of becoming a face of the league. Every sentence becomes evidence. Every look becomes a debate. Every mistake becomes a lesson. Wemby wanted to sound unshaken. But after Game 5, those words came back with teeth. Because belief is powerful. But belief without execution is just noise. Game 5 and the wall that finally cracked. In Game 5, Wembanyama came out like he had something to prove. Defensively, he was everywhere. He erased angles. He forced New York to think twice before attacking the paint. He closed space that should not have been closable. For one half, it looked like his belief might actually become reality. But the finals do not break you all at once. They drain you possession by possession. The Knicks kept moving him. They made him defend in space. They forced him to sprint, rotate, contest, recover, and do it again. Every minute took something from his legs. Then Brunson arrived in the fourth quarter. That was the moment the game became personal. Brunson did not look like the biggest player on the floor. He looked like the calmest. Every possession, he found the gap. Every time San Antonio needed a stop, he found one more answer. Wembanyama fought, he blocked shots, he rebounded, he tried to carry the Spurs through the storm. But carrying a team in June is different from carrying one in January. By the end, his numbers were respectable. But respect does not soften heartbreak. The scoreboard still said New York, the trophy still went to the Knicks. And Wemby was left with the cruelest truth in basketball. You can be special and still not be ready. The former teammate on the other bench, every finals has a hidden edge. Sometimes it is not the superstar taking the last shot. Sometimes it is not the coach drawing up the perfect play. Sometimes it is one person on the other bench who knows too much. For Victor Wembanyama, that person was Jeremy Sochan. Sochan was not the headline of the series. He was not dropping 30. He was not guarding Wemby for 40 minutes. In fact, he barely played. But that is what made his presence so uncomfortable. He did not need heavy minutes to matter. He had something New York could use every single night. He had memory. He had shared the court with Wembanyama in San Antonio. He had seen the habits, the rhythms, the moments when Wemby wanted the ball, the moments when fatigue could start to show, the kind of physicality that could make a 7'4" superstar work harder than he wanted to. And in the finals, information can become a weapon. The Knicks did not treat Wembanyama like a normal star. They treated him like a system that needed to be worn down. They made him move. They pulled him away from the rim. They sent bodies into him. They forced him to defend, recover, sprint, contest, then turn around and carry the offense on the next possession. That is not random basketball. That is a plan. And Sochan's understanding of Wemby gave that plan an extra layer. He knew the Knicks could not simply challenge Wembanyama at the rim over and over. That would be foolish. So instead, New York made him spend energy before the shot even happened. They dragged him into actions. They made him communicate. They made him switch, help, rotate, and chase. By the fourth quarter, those small attacks became heavy. That is when Brunson became most dangerous, because once Wemby had spent 3 quarters protecting everything, the Knicks no longer needed to beat the best version of him. They only needed to beat the tired version, and that is the cruel genius of playoff basketball. There was also the emotional side. At one point, Sochan appeared to talk from the Knicks bench, trying to get a reaction from his former teammate. The cameras caught the moment, fans immediately noticed it. A former Spur, now wearing enemy colors, trying to get under Wembanyama's skin on the biggest stage in the sport. But Wemby gave him nothing. No argument, no stare down, no dramatic reply. He just kept moving. That silence was not weakness. It was control. It showed that Wembanyama understood exactly what New York wanted. They wanted frustration. They wanted him distracted. They wanted one emotional mistake that could turn into one bad possession, then one lost game. He refused to give them that. But even silence cannot erase the damage of a good game plan. The Knicks kept stacking little advantages. One hard bump here, one extra sprint there, one possession where Wemby had to cover 2 mistakes at once, one late closeout that took just a little more out of his legs. By the end of Game 5, the story was not that Wembanyama lacked heart. He had plenty of it. The story was that New York understood how to make his greatness expensive. Every block cost energy. Every rebound cost contact. Every defensive rotation cost oxygen. And when the final minutes arrived, the Knicks were the team with cleaner legs, calmer minds, and sharper execution. That is what champions do. They do not always beat you with beauty. Sometimes they beat you with pressure, patience, and details. Nobody notices until it is too late. For Wembanyama, Sochan's presence was another lesson inside the larger lesson. In the finals, everyone matters. The superstar matters. The MVP matters. The bench matters. Even the player who barely checks into the game can change a series if he gives the right information at the right time. And that is why this loss will stay with Wemby. Because he did not just learn about the Knicks, he learned about the league. He learned that once you become the target, every former teammate, every scouting report, every weakness, every habit, every emotional trigger will be studied and used against you. The NBA is not waiting for him anymore. It is hunting him. The miracle before the pain. Before the heartbreak, before the podium, before Wembanyama said he was pissed, San Antonio had already done something nobody expected. They had turned a rebuild into a revolution. The Spurs were not supposed to be standing on the final stage this soon. Not with a core this young, not with a team that still looked, on paper, like it was 1 or 2 years away from truly terrifying the league. But Victor Wembanyama changed the calendar. He did not wait for the future. He dragged the future into the present. That is why this story hurts so much. Because this was not a failed season. This was a miracle season that ended one step too early. San Antonio entered the year as a team full of questions. Could Wemby handle the weight of being the franchise? Could Stephon Castle grow fast enough beside him? Could Dylan Harper survive the pressure of playoff basketball? Could a group this young actually win when veteran teams started targeting every mistake? For months, they answered yes. Wembanyama became the center of everything. On defense, he made players rethink shots they normally loved. Guards drove into the paint, saw him waiting, and suddenly turned brave decisions into desperate passes. Big men who usually played with power looked uncomfortable trying to score over his reach. On offense, he was not just tall, he was unpredictable. He could face up, shoot, pass, attack from strange angles, and turn broken possessions into highlights. The Spurs did not just have a star, they had a problem the league had not fully solved yet. And the young players around him started growing with his gravity. Castle brought toughness, Harper brought energy. The supporting cast learned how to play with a player who bends the entire floor just by standing on it. Slowly, San Antonio stopped looking like a fun young team and started looking like a real threat. Then the wins came. 62 of them, a number nobody saw coming. A number that forced the entire NBA to take San Antonio seriously. The Spurs were no longer a cute story. They were no longer just Wemby highlights on social media. They were beating good teams, breaking scouting reports, and making veterans look nervous. Then came the playoffs. That was supposed to be where youth got exposed. Instead, San Antonio grew louder. They played with a strange mix of innocence and arrogance, like a team too young to understand fear and too talented to respect limits. They survived physical games. They survived hostile arenas. They survived pressure that should have crushed them. And then they met Oklahoma City. That Western Conference Finals was not just a series. It was a test of the new NBA. Two young powers. Two visions of the future. Two teams trying to prove they were not just next, but now. When San Antonio finally survived that 7-game war, Wembanyama's emotion told the whole story. The tears were real, the joy was real, the belief was real. He had taken the Spurs from the lottery to the finals, and for a moment, it felt like destiny had picked him. That is the dangerous thing about destiny. It makes heartbreak feel impossible until it happened. By the time the Spurs reached the Knicks, the world had changed its opinion. Suddenly, San Antonio was not just happy to be there. People expected them to win. Analysts picked them. Fans believed Wemby was already too special to be denied. But the finals are not a place for fairy tales unless you finish the final page. New York had something San Antonio could not fake. They had years of pain, pressure, and patience. They had the emotional maturity to stay alive, even when San Antonio looked better. That is what makes the Spurs run both beautiful and brutal. They proved they were close. Then they learned close is not enough. Still, nobody in San Antonio should look at this season as failure. Painful, yes. Unfinished, absolutely. But failure? No. This was the birth of something. Wembanyama is still only 22. Castle is still learning. Harper is still growing. The team has already felt the heat of June, already seen what a championship room looks like, already learned how thin the line is between holding the trophy and watching someone else hold it. That experience cannot be bought. It has to be suffered. The Knicks won the title, and they deserved it. But the Spurs discovered their future is not far away. It is already in the building, already angry, already replaying every mistake, and that may be the scariest part for the rest of the NBA. San Antonio did not reach its peak. It reached its warning shot, the loss that could create a monster. Some losses fade after a few weeks, the players go on vacation, the noise disappears, the league moves to free agency, trades, rumors, and the next big story. This loss will not fade for Victor Wembanyama. It will follow him into every quiet gym. It will follow him through every early morning workout. It will sit beside him when he watches film and sees the same mistakes again and again. The 2 9-point lead, the late game possessions, the Brunson buckets, the rebounds that bounce the wrong way. The moments when San Antonio was one play from control and somehow ended up empty, that is the kind of pain that does not simply hurt. It teaches. For Wembanyama, the most dangerous part is that he did not sound defeated after the loss. He sounded disturbed by time. He was angry that the road back to the finals would take almost 100 games. Think about what that means. Most players need distance after heartbreak. Wemby was already impatient for another chance. That is not normal. That is the mindset of someone who has tasted the highest level and now cannot accept anything below it. Before this finals, Wembanyama knew pressure. He had been hyped since before entering the league. He had been called a generational prospect. He had been watched, analyzed, praised, criticized, and compared to legends before he had enough time to become himself. But the finals are different. The finals do not just test your talent. They test your habits. They test your calm. They test your teammates, your stamina, your leadership, your emotional control, and your ability to make the right decision when your lungs are burning and the entire world is waiting for you to fail. Wemby passed some of those tests. He failed others. That is why this loss could create something terrifying, because now he knows exactly what the league will do to him. Teams will not just admire him anymore. They will hunt him. They will force him into uncomfortable spots. They will send smaller defenders into his legs, stronger defenders into his body, and smarter defenders into his patience. They will make him run. They will make him think. They will make him prove he can dominate when every possession is designed to exhaust him. And now he has a full summer to answer. A young superstar with no scar is dangerous. A young superstar with the right scar is something else entirely. This finals gave Wembanyama a scar. Not the kind that weakens him, the kind that reminds him. Every great player has one. Michael Jordan had Detroit. LeBron had Dallas. Kobe had early heartbreak before the championships became part of his identity. Those moments were humiliating in real time, but later they became turning points. This could be Wemby's turning point. The NBA saw him lose, but more importantly, Wembanyama saw himself lose. He saw the difference between blocking shots and closing games. He saw that being the most talented player in the building does not automatically make you the most prepared. He saw that young teams can dominate for 44 minutes and still lose everything in the Final Four. That realization can break confidence, or it can build obsession, and everything about Wemby's response suggests obsession is coming. Next season, every normal regular season game will feel different for San Antonio. A random January matchup will not just be a random January matchup. It will be another step toward the place they were forced to leave. Every fourth quarter will become a rehearsal. Every close game will become a test. Every mistake will carry the echo of New York's celebration. The Spurs will not be sneaking up on anyone anymore. That part is over. Now they will be circled Teams will prepare for them like contenders, arenas will be louder, opponents will be more physical, the pressure will not decrease because they are young. It will increase because everyone has seen what they can become. That is the next challenge. Can Wembanyama lead when the league is no longer surprised? Can San Antonio improve when every team is studying its weaknesses? Can this young core take pain and turn it into discipline instead of fear? That is where champions are made. Not in the celebration, in the response. The Knicks took the trophy, they earned the parade, they made history, but they may have also done something they will regret. They may have awakened the one player nobody wanted to make angry, because the next version of Victor Wembanyama will not just be chasing highlights. He will be chasing revenge through discipline, through patience, through execution, through every lesson New York forced him to learn. And when he finally returns to that stage, he will not be the same kid who watched the confetti fall for someone else. He will be the player shaped by it, the lesson behind the heartbreak. The Knicks won because they were ready for the final moments. The Spurs lost because they were still learning how cruel those moments can be. That is not an insult. That is the truth of championship basketball. Talent opens the door. Experience teaches you how to walk through it. San Antonio had brilliance, energy, and one of the most unique young stars the league has ever seen. But New York had patience, scars, and the calm of a team that had waited 53 years for one chance and refused to waste it. For Wembanyama, this finals loss may become the most important chapter of his career. Not because it gave him a ring, but because it gave him a mirror. He saw where he was great. He saw where he was not ready. He saw how small mistakes become permanent memories when the whole world is watching. And that is a lesson beyond basketball. In life, losing does not always mean you are weak. Sometimes it means you have reached a level where your old habits are no longer enough. Growth begins when pain stops being an excuse and becomes a teacher. Wemby has a choice now: carry the loss as a wound or carry it as wisdom. The greatest players usually choose wisdom. The Knicks deserve their celebration. Their fans waited a lifetime for this. Their city earned that joy. But in San Antonio, something else is beginning. A young superstar has been hurt, humbled, and awakened. And when he comes back, the league may see a different version of Victor Wembanyama. If you respect the Knicks championship heart, press 1. If you believe Wemby will return stronger and win his first ring soon, press 2. Like the video, share it with another NBA fan, and subscribe for more stories from inside the league's biggest moment.